All right, good morning for the second day of Dawn or Doom. It's 9 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. I am pleased to introduce Dr. Stephen Elliot. Dr. Elliot is an associate professor with an appointment in technology, leadership, and innovation at Purdue University. He's the director of the International Center for Biometric Research. Dr. Elliot also served as the assistant director of the Center for Education and Research in Information Assurance and Security. Dr. Elliot serves on a number of advisory and standards boards and has been honored for his teaching, research, and work in the voluntary consensus standards. He's published over 100 articles on biometrics, ranging from chapters, journal articles, and conference proceedings, and has given numerous talks on biometric research. Today, he will present a talk titled Goodbye Passwords. So please silent your electronic devices, but don't put them away. We want to see you tweeting to the hashtag Dawn or Doom. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Elliot.
Thank you. So I wanted to start off today's presentation just by playing a short video and just seeing whether you remember this for some of you in the audience. And that should really be the end of my presentation, because that's biometrics getting spoofed. So thanks for coming today. Sorry that it was only 3 minutes long. So every time this happens, and it happens quite a lot, a little bit of me and everyone in the center kind of dies, because it's always Hollywood that's trying to spoof biometric. That was 1992, so for those of you that remember that, sorry for judging back. That was a long time ago now. But it was kind of the classic voice recognition spoof, where you've got people coming in and trying to do that. And I guess it's good and bad, because the good thing is that you see that Hollywood pays attention to this, but the bad thing is that it's biometrics that are getting spoofed. And I'm going to talk about biometrics today with respects to passwords. So why do they do it? Well, because having Robert Redford up there trying to type in a 4-digit PIN 20 times just isn't that sexy, right? It's just really not that exciting. So one of the challenges that we have with biometrics is always this, right? Where people will ask, I'm sure someone's going to ask today, so I'm just going to nip this one in the bud. Well, I can fake it out. Mythbusters does this, and they do it every so often. You see movies doing that. But what we need to think about is really what we're protecting and what we have currently, and that currently is a 4-digit PIN, and that's not very good at all. So what I'm going to do today is just introduce you to the world of biometrics and take a look at passwords and beyond 1992 and that infamous movie. I say it's infamous because actually one biometric vendor actually uses that as their marketing tool, where you repeat into it. And so I'm not sure whether that's cunning or not. So that's something that we'll take a look at. I got some toys up here as well, so we'll be passing those around. And I'm also going to remote back into my lab so you can see a bigger biometric device being used as well. So when we come to that, I'll show you a little bit about that as well. So as Kevin said, my talk today is going to be goodbye passwords, and we'll go from there. So a little bit of warming up here, because it is 9 o'clock in the morning. It's a little early for some of us, right? How many of us reuse passwords in here? Don't be bashful. Jerry's not in here. Okay. All right. How many of us use easy-to-guess passwords? Don't be bashful. Come on. Nope, nope. All right. And how many of us have to change our password when we log into a site because we haven't used that one for a while? Okay, good. All right. So then I'm going to ask another question, kind of the doom side of this. How many of us have been or know someone that's been hacked or have had their identity stolen? All right, and anyone that's been through that process, quite a lot of you actually for the people at the front, so quite a lot of you have known someone. So wait a minute here. Some of us reuse our passwords. Some of us use easy-to-guess passwords. Some of us always change our passwords when we need to log onto that website, yet most of us know someone or have had our identity stolen. So we know that there's this inherent weakness with passwords. And back in 1992, when I was doing some thinking and researching for this presentation, I thought, well, I wonder what phones looked like back then. And they definitely weren't the clever kinds of phones that we have today, which have biometrics on board. And although this one's the iPhone that has it, Apple, ironically, were not the first people to have biometrics or fingerprints on their phone at all. So you're not the only people, because 55%, this is an Ofcom study, a study in the UK from 2 years ago. 55 of us use the same passwords for different websites. 26 of us use common names or places. My grad student, Zach, is back in the lab. You'll see him in a minute. And we all kind of like to hate him sometimes when he redoes the passwords, because he has these really complicated long passwords, and we're like, really? And you just use like something that's simple that we can remember. And then we become hypocritical. We're like, oh, we're in a biometrics lab. Maybe we should use some of that technology too. So we all suffer with these things. 25% of us have problems remembering passwords. That's if we make them clever enough. And there is an improvement, though. So the dawn part of this is that with respects to cell phone use, 75% of people say they use a screen lock, and 50% say they have PIN protection for their SIM card. How many of you have some form of lock on your phone? Good, good. So I was watching the radio the other day. So this is kind of a bizarre scenario, but every so often the radio station I listen to online broadcasts, and they have a camera pointing right down at the DJ, and the DJ must not have realized that he was being broadcast, because on his iPhone, he typed in the PIN in clear view, because the camera was right over his shoulder. And I was just like, what did I just see, And you sit there and you think, well, how strong is that? Now, obviously, someone could try and get that, but if he just went like that, it would be a lot easier with his fingerprints. So we see that there are definitely improvements, but there's a long way to go, because while it may be on your devices, we also see that a lot of people don't use those devices after a period of time. So we do see some inherent, oh, it's really cool, and then some, nah, it doesn't work for me, I'm going to go back to something that's pretty cool. How many of you have Windows 10? Okay, so for those of you that have Windows 10, do you have Windows Hello yet, or do you do? Do you like it? Okay, did it work? Good, I'll pay you $5 afterwards, because that was the right answer, right? All right, good. How many of you have the PIN option? Did you think that was really weird when they said, oh, you want to use a PIN, which is a 4-digit PIN instead of a password? Did that kind of think, wonder what they're doing there? So there's some interesting challenges here. So what I'm going to talk about is biometrics. So what is a biometric? Anyone know? Yes? It is. It's you, basically. And there's lots of different biometrics around. So the most common ones here are fingerprint, iris, face, voice, and signature. Now, it's ironic, because we sign every day when we go to Best Buy and buy cool stuff, or we go somewhere else and buy stuff, we sign. For those of you that were out late last night, your signature may not have been perfect at 2 o'clock in the morning. But we take that as a legal signature. So it's kind of disappointing, really, that we have voice all the time and we have signature all the time, but we don't actually use those in the methods that they could be used for, such as authentication. So with voice recognition on our cell phones, we could use that all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Kevin to pass some of this stuff around. So I have a little iris camera here. So this stuff is really kind of affordable. This is an iris camera. We just got this the other day. Hopefully I don't have any students in here, because they're going to unbox it next week. So I'm going to have to put it back in the box, and we're not going to stream this until after that. But it's a Myris device. Kev, how much was this thing? So $150, iris recognition device. It's like a hockey puck. The nice thing about it is that it has a mirror, and you just bring it up to your eye like that, and it's done. So, Kevin, you want to pass that one around? This one here is really cool. Anyone guess what this would be? No? This is a vein recognition device. So you put your hand over the device like this, about that far, and it recognizes the veins in the palm of your hand. This is made by Fujitsu, and it's about $100 and some odd as well. There you go. So that's really cool. That's another device. Yes? Yeah, I think that was the case, right? I think that was the case. The good thing about Apple is that they put it in there. So then all of a sudden, everybody got hold of these devices, right? The demo that I'm going to show in a minute is a border control demo. So for those of you that are traveling in and out of countries and the like, it's a lot easier to use the biometric system. So I think it's awareness, and then once people start buying, the price will come down. Good question. This one here is a fingerprint sensor, and you can see this is just attaches to a USB. This will work with Windows 10. I'll pass that one around as well. And this one's a little bit different. This one is a bigger brother of that Myris device. This is an iris access control device. So you throw it on a wall, and then you just come up to it and look at it like that. So this is a fairly mid-range kind of device, again, from iLock. And then this one is the one that you probably see. The university has a couple of deployments of these. This one is a hand geometry device. And it's a bit, it's a bit big, so that sometimes falls out of favor. But we have it on access to our center, and it works really, really well. And it's a 4-digit pin, and then you put your hand in here like this, and it works just fine. So we've got this. So if you want to take a look at this later on today, feel free to do so. So what we saw in the attack on the video when I started was really just an exercise in false accepts. And the one thing that some people get a little bit frustrated about with biometrics, and they have absolutely every right to do so, is that we work on a game of probability. So when we ask people how many times they want to get into their bank, right? So it's coming up to the end of the month. How many of you really want your bank to be secure? All of you, right? Makes absolute sense for that to occur. How many of you get frustrated or would get frustrated if you locked it down by biometrics but couldn't get in every time? Okay, now how many of you would get frustrated if I could get into your bank account? Okay, so there's no win here, right? There's a trade-off going on that you find. And so that's why when you put biometric devices in and you integrate them, you really have to wonder about what are you trying to lock down and what are the other ways of getting around it in order to make that customer satisfaction even more important. And we're going to talk a little bit about this because to answer your question a little bit about why hasn't it been adopted and so forth, some of that stuff is that people may just not generically set it up correctly. So the other aspect of it is that there are two market segments, both of which post 9/11 and maybe post 2007, 2008 have really got the biometric market really excited. And that is access control, whether that's getting into a room or getting into your phone, and border control, whether that's getting into the US or London or Amsterdam, wherever it is. How many of you are members of Global Entry? How many of you travel internationally? All right, for those of you who travel internationally, this is my DHS advert for the day, since I got to renew mine. If you're a permanent resident or a US citizen and you don't like lining up in that big line when you get off that long plane journey, then enroll in Global Entry, because Global Entry basically is a program that enables you to miss that line, not see an immigration officer, and interact with a kiosk. And the good thing about that is that if your flight is running late and you sit in that plane and you're like, wonder whether I'm going to make it because I'm not quite sure how long that line is, you can ignore that line and just go around. Now, I've only got one of my colleagues that I travel with. I tried to do that one day flying into Washington, D.C., and I was sitting next door to him on the plane. I said, you know what, Kevin, I'm going to get through, and I'm going to show you how wonderful biometrics is. Get off that line. That immigration hall was empty. I'm like, I'm still going for the biometrics. I'm going to prove my point. He sails through. I'll meet your baggage claim. So that's the only time I don't think it worked, right? It was kind of crazy. So what I'm going to show you now, hopefully, Zach, are you there? Okay. Let me, can you, the browser timed out. Here we go. Let's see if I can do my stuff here. All right, so I've got Zach here at the, there he is. All right, and he's one of my grad students that really wishes he never picked up the phone this morning at 7:30 in the morning to do this. Because I was driving in, I'm like, oh, really cool, the remote into the lab. And you can see, yeah, he looks thrilled. Sorry, Zach, it'll be okay, you graduate soon. So let's do Iris first. Is it gonna work for me, or do I need to redo the username and password? Okay. So this is a border control environment booth that we have set up in the center. Zach is doing this as part of his thesis research. And the idea here is that he would come into a border, and you can see the Iris camera there working. I'm not going to blow it up a little bit because I want you to see that we'll capture the eyes and the face right there off of that. So he, imagine this is a border control scenario. In fact, if anyone has flown through the United Arab Emirates, you are likely to have seen these devices in the center. Zach, I'm just going to ask you to do it again, and then I'm just going to blow up the screen here, so I don't know what I can do. What you'll see here on the top, right, where it says, look here, it's not very clear, but you can see those lights flashing, right? He can't actually see those lights. It's kind of weird, because it's very, very dull red. But they're near-infrared lights, and what they're doing is they're pulsing the eye just to make sure that it's a live eye. So when we're talking about liveness detection, what we're doing is just shining a real low-level light in. It's a bit like near-infrared, so shining a remote control in your face. And your eyes will just change just slightly, and we're looking for that for liveness detection, amongst other things. But as well, in this scenario, this would be in a border control environment. And as part of that border control environment, what we're trying to do in the center, and part of his research that he's doing, is essentially trying to optimize that flow through that border patrol or border post. So with all of the well-behaved people going through the kiosks, you're going to get a lot of people that are going through the border, with the border booth people that have paperwork or visas or something else. And so what we're trying to do in the center, and this is his research, is to go ahead and optimize that flow within there and create some usability so we can actually give a little bit more feedback. So that is the Iris camera. And now, Zach, you want to do, hold on, fingerprint for me? So what most people would interact with in the fingerprint device is, this is typical coming into the US. How many people have interacted with a fingerprint device on the border? Okay, so we know what we're doing here. So this is what we're looking for. Off you go. I think it's ready. So you can see here, it's a little bit laggy, but you can see here, this is a live scan where he brings up his fingerprints. And what we're looking for is quality, good control quality, and everything else like that. So that's an interaction that we use in our research there. And if anyone is interested in participating in Zach's data collection, see me afterwards. There you go, I recruited for you. All right, thanks, Zach. All right. So that's one aspect of border control environments. And we see that, although it's not necessarily related to passwords, it definitely has got people thinking about this type of technology and understanding a little bit more about why, if they can have it on the border, why can't I have it maybe on my phone or on my on my computer or PC and the like. So we now see this addition of thinking about things with respect to phones. And that's one of the exciting things that we have with respect to biometrics is what can we do on this? So for those of you that like to develop apps, this is an interesting space to be in because there is a pile of people just rushing to figure out how to do biometrics on a phone. Now, sometimes it's a little bit challenging when you don't necessarily have control of that ecosystem in which you're developing for. And so in the center, we have been doing a lot of research on usability, testing, and evaluation of these kinds of devices. And we've just done a study on looking at face recognition and face recognition on phones. We did a study about 4 or 5 years ago looking at the whites of your eye, so the veins in the whites of your eye. And what would the mode of operation there is that you would look into the camera like this, and be about that far away, and it would log you in. Now, some people might be a little bit uncomfortable with their phone being this close to them, right? Or doing that authentication. I mean, it might look a bit weird. Although we do lots of weird things. Who thought the selfie stick would be kind of cool or something like that, right? But, you know, it's all relative. But when you sit there and think about it, this is kind of an interesting tool. And so when we see new developments and new apps, we like to get them in the center. One of the two things that we're looking at next is Zach, but this is a recorded version of Zach, is looking at authenticating someone on the phone. So just kind of wanted to show you some screenshots of what that would look like. So I'm going to just mute him a little bit. So you can see it's typing in the username there, user ID, and you can see here that he's got to line up there, put his face in that silhouette. And one of the things that we find when we do our testing and evaluation is that we need to prompt the user to do as much work as possible, but at the same time make it as easy as possible for them to use it. So we see here, if it had no silhouette, some people might be wondering, well, how do we go ahead and use it? Am I too far away? Is it too right? Perfect, and everything else like that. So you can see, for example, there, the silhouette is something that is going to help him line up his face with what's going on. The other area of research that we do here while we've got this up is anything you notice with respect to the image on your left-hand side, where he is with his face. Shadows, right? So this is one of the challenges that we have with mobile devices that we might not have had, say, in the traditional testing and evaluation that we did at the beginning, maybe 10, 12 years ago. That border control environment that you see is pretty much stable. It's a pretty okay environment. It's a little dark in the lab where we have it set up, but that's in purpose in some cases. But it's stable. The iris camera is big. It's not going to move. The challenges that we have with this now, and to get this working, is we have all of these ambient lighting conditions. If you take it to the bars or something else like that, when you're trying to authenticate or in a plane or whatever, there's going to be a lot of different noises, and we're going to have to figure out a way to sample that out. So by putting biometrics, by getting people excited in biometrics, there's a lot of work that still has to be done in trying to make it work for all of the different environments that we deal with. And we see the app developers getting a lot better at doing this, in fact, because that's where the bread and butter is, right? They don't want to have you do something that isn't necessarily going to work. So we do a lot of testing with different lighting levels and conditions, and we also do testing, what we call wild testing, where we give you phones to go out. But you can see what he's trying to do is line up his face, and then in this particular case, we're trying to get you to look away, just disengage from that particular device, and look down. So that's a test that we would run just to try and help companies try and improve that in there as well. So that's one aspect of our testing that we do. And then he's going to say that number. So we have two factors. We have face recognition, and we have voice recognition. All right, and the voice recognition tool is commercially available. You can download that on the App Store, and I'm sure this will come along soon. There's a lot of work in this area. Other companies too are involved in this that we work in. So there's lots and lots of startups that are trying to get into this space, and that's kind of exciting to see for us. Most of our work and research is in this mobile space to get rid of passwords and trying to figure out how best to do this in an environment. Now, something that's really, really cool that we're going to share with you today is corneal topography. And we just got this device two days ago. This is an Australian company that is looking at doing corneal topography as a biometric. And that's looking at the shape of your eyes. So wherever the iris camera is, that's looking at obviously your iris. And this one is looking at your cornea. And so again, whoops, let me mute this. You can see that it's a little bit of a experiment at the moment. But what we're looking at is the shape of the cornea. So let me just go back there. Oops. freeze that a little bit. So that's what we're looking at, right? The richness of the eye. Now, of course, this isn't a cell phone at all, but it's not going to take too much time to get this miniaturized. But you can see another aspect of people looking at particular biometrics. So we're always testing the latest and greatest. It's kind of fun. If you want to take a look around the facility, again, let myself or Kevin at the back know, and we can organize some tours for you to take a look at that and play with the stuff if you want to. So now we've got to the stage where, well, we've got biometrics, and they seem to be working okay, but you, as customers, you want it to work right every time, and it may not necessarily do that, all right? And so there's that pinch point of trying to understand at what point are you going to need the device, and then think about the context of how you're going to operate the device. So one of the things that we're now looking at is contextual biometrics. Biometrics in the context of what you're doing. So let me give you an example. I lead a particularly boring life, apparently, according to my data. I get up in the morning. Admittedly, this is early. No, I get up in the morning. I come in here. I go to Young. I leave Young, do some other stuff, and then I go home. When I fly, I'm very, very consistent. I go on United, all right? You can have all the comments and postcards at the back, and I'll address them, but it is what it is. I'm used to them. And so when I'm on United, or I'm traveling, and I want to gain access, say, to my United miles, or I want to get a transaction done, in that context of that travel, my phone should know that I'm doing this activity. It knows that I'm going to leave my house, bomb it down the road as quickly as possible without breaking any laws, because I always leave it a little late. United needs to know that it's going to be about 30 minutes before that plane takes off that I'm going to appear. We're going to have that little one-to-one about why you're not going to accept my bags, then they will. And then I'll run through security using the pre-check because I'm enrolled in global entry, so that's good. And then I'll end up at the gate, and then it'll be late anyway. So I get on the plane, and I'm doing my transactions. Now, if I wanted to go ahead and say I needed to check my balance, or I wanted to upgrade really quickly, or I wanted to do something, then my phone should know in that context that I'm trying to do this transaction really quickly. I'm standing right in the United gates. I'm doing everything that I normally do, so you don't have to make me jump through 17 hoops to do this transaction. On the flip side, if I flew Delta, my phone should ask me lots of questions because I don't normally do that. And so in the context of looking at what we do, we need to try and figure out how we merge biometrics, which can give you that false accept and false reject that we don't like or don't want, within the context of some transaction that we want to do. Let's assume that I'm in a store, right? And I'm shopping for, say I'm shopping for furniture. And I got my store credit card. What's the one thing that I might be thinking while I'm in the store? Bingo, all right? Do I have enough money to buy what I want to buy? So what would I do? Is no transaction really, but what am I going to do right away? Jump online, see where they have money, right? Do I have to jump through every hoop to just see if I just have enough money to make the transaction? I'm not making any transaction. I just want to see what's going on. If I'm in the store, the GPS of the phone leaks that I'm there, I've got a card, I have the membership and all of that other stuff, then we can use biometrics and GPS and all of the other factors that this phone collects to maybe have a better trust score than if I had never been in that store before and I wanted to check, say, my PEFQ account. So what we're seeing now is a little bit more logic built into the phones, and I think it's probably a whole different discussion about whether you agree or disagree that the phones collect all of this information on you. But if you do sit here and think about it, the next stage where we think is going to be pretty cool is in the context of wearables. And so some of our research with respect to goodbye to passwords is looking at wearables and what they can do for you. How many of you are wearing some form of Fitbit or something else like that? All right, so one of the things that we're looking at now is what can that device say a little bit about you and how you operate, right? It tells you maybe your paces. It might tell you heart rate. If you have the jawbone up 4, anyone have the up 4 at all? You do? Oh, 3. The up 4 does payments, all right? How are we going to authenticate a payment? Just going to wave the band? And so what we have to think about is, can we double the biometric onto that as well? Can we use the contextual biometrics that we've got, so the knowledge that we have about an individual, to go ahead and find a little bit more stuff about you in order to layer that information within the biometric. So this is all fine, right? There's nothing wrong with this technology. But if I want to log onto my phone, I want to make a transaction, and I can't do that because I shouldn't be using it anyway, I am driving, all right? If you're driving down 231 and someone's doing that, right, in the other lane, all right, we need to, that's, all right, how many people, you don't have to stick your hands up because he's recording at the back, but how many people text or do stuff on their phone when they're on the move, all right? And you kind of, I mean, that's the fact of reality of the world, right? You probably don't want to be doing something that's going to take your eyes off the road anyway. You probably don't want to be doing stuff like that when you're doing that. So again, contextual biometrics may kind of help some of those things. And you're probably kind of doing a really stupid thing anyway, like texting or doing that while you're driving anyway. But if your phone locks, you don't want to be doing that to unlock it, all right? And so what you've got to think about is, can we use contextual biometrics to layer the authentication? Because some of the stuff that we do really isn't that important in the whole security scheme of things, and other things that we do is really important. And at the moment, we have a one-size-fits-all, which is that 4-digit PIN, or the fingerprint, or something else like that. So I think in the long term, we're definitely going to see a lot more work in this area, as well as in wearables. And we've got kind of an interesting research project that we're doing this semester as well, with some undergrads in the minor and some students in the MS online. And we're looking at how good those wearables are. Because obviously, if you want to use a wearable for biometrics and you're going to do a transaction on it, you need to make sure that all of the data that comes out of these things is good, all right? How many of you have one wearable and you check it against a phone or moves or something else like that? Is it always the right number? Same number? Is there a difference between the wearable and the phone tracking, or 2 wearables or anything? It's different. So if I'm going to make a transaction, or I'm going to try and build some information about you on your wearable, I need to make sure that that data is good. So I've been checking yesterday I didn't hardly do anything apparently. I just trundled around 2,000 paces. But my phone said I did 1,500. It was a lazy day. And this said I did 2,500. So we're off by 1,000 already, all right? I don't carry my phone everywhere, so that's one of the reasons. But if I'm going to make some logic about my behavior, then we need to start making sure that all of the wearable devices that we have are going to give consistent data. Otherwise, you're going to make some actions that don't make any sense. Northumbria Police is using wearables as form of, they're doing a trial with the Microsoft Band to look at heart rates of officers when they're on patrol. So the idea, I guess, would be if the heart rate spikes, something's happening, right? Well, you don't want the heart rate to spike when they're just running to the car when it's raining or something, right? So we need to put context around the transaction. So in order for us to alleviate this issue of my voice is my password, verify me, we need to make sure that there is context. One of the other things that we look at, just before I close on this, is to think about biometrics in the context of security. Because we talk about goodbye passwords, and something that kind of frustrates people in the field is that we always hold biometrics to a much, much higher level. When you really think about it, how did he get into that room in order to get his Walkman out to play the tape? He used a magstripe card. What do we do transactions on? How do we get into our bank accounts? How do we do all of that? We use a magstripe card. So if you think about the challenges with magstripe cards, and you think about some of the challenges about biometrics, always kind of take a look at it. What are you trying to protect? How are you going to protect it? And at the same time, think about your equivalencies. Currently, you have a 4-digit PIN. It's not that good. So when you can replace that with anything that's better than that, we should kind of be jumping on that bandwagon. I think that's why we see People in startups going for this because, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, a quarter of us reuse the same passwords and the like. Now, there are obviously some challenges, and we see this all the time. As soon as something like this comes out, so I'm going to pick on Maria because she said she'd be in here and she was going to heckle, and I haven't heard it yet, so I'm going to pick on you anyway. So the Today Show came, right? And the day the Today Show came, the night before CNN did the review on this, that a cat's paw could unlock a phone. And that's all Today Show is interested in. Oh, the cat can unlock the phone. Good. Happy for the cat. But you sit about that and go, well, first of all, the cat's got to enroll. It's be a clever cat. It's got to figure out what it wants to buy. Really clever cat. And then it does the transaction. You got an awesome cat. You should be selling it for TV reality shows or something. You shouldn't just be doing, well, my phone can unlock this thing. And that's all they were kind of interested in until we started getting them back down to the level ground and looking at this exact challenge, which was passwords. And I think that's sometimes where we always forget. We always get sidetracked when it comes to biometrics on really bizarre things that, yeah, well, of course, right? So what if the cat can unlock the phone? If you take a look at cat's paws, what are on there? They're features, right? This is just a feature extraction tool, right? And so fingerprint has ridges and valleys. It's a set of features. But look in the context of things, right? Is it really a big deal if the thing can unlock the phone? Get your phone away from the cats, right? Just think about it. And so that's something that I always want to take a look at is when you see Hollywood, and I'm sure the next blockbuster will have a biometric that's going to get spoofed, is think about that context. Think about, yeah, sure, it's easy to spoof. How easy is it to spoof a magstripe card? Amazon.com give you all the bits and pieces to do that. All right? We just don't always think in those contexts. So I definitely think, passwords, in 20 years' time, yeah, there'll still be some hangouts that will use them. All right? There'll be businesses and industries that will still have a hard time moving. It's sometimes difficult. And this is not a good thing to say with a bunch of ITAP people in the room, but sometimes it's difficult to drag organizations there because they really do want to protect your identity, right? And so while we may get frustrated with all of the, change your passwords and all of those policies, at the end of the day, would you want them to do something different than that? No. And so they're stuck with the same scenario we're stuck with in biometrics. If I make it really hard to get in, you'll complain. If I make it really easy to get in, I complain. The guys in blue shirts with fingerprints on them have just a lousy job in trying to balance all of that security needs from you wanting to get in to you not wanting everyone else to get into your needs. So I think biometrics is just part of that solution. It's not a replacement. It's another layer that we can use to ensure that we protect what's right to protect. At the same time, we give you easier access. Plus, it's a lot cooler. All right, that's my presentation. Anyone have any questions? I'm sure they do. Kevin's going to...
If you have questions, I have a microphone for you.
Uh-oh.
I guess anytime you look at iris, what do contact lenses do to that? I assume you've looked at that.
That's a really good question. Let me see whether, okay, so you can see on that eye there. Once upon a time, there were hard contact lenses, right? And they would actually sit on the top of the iris. And so when we got our first iris device, we were able to see actually the contact lens ring on the iris. And they would spend a lot of time trying to process that ring off the iris. Now the contact lens sits on the sclera of the eye, so the white of the eye. So it's not really that much problem for us. We'll just handle it that way. Now, if you have colored contacts and stuff like that, then the system may not like it. But the challenge is, in the same context, say I'm coming into a border control environment, the immigration officer may not like it either. All right? So if you come in with weird cat's eyes or whatever, what's going on. And sometimes the Halloween things, the iris camera will go, well, what's going on with you? The immigration officer in the same context will go, yeah, take him out. So typically in a use case that we got, it can handle contact lenses okay. So the little Myris device that goes around is perfectly okay. Good question, though. It always comes up. Okay.
Do you have research on effect of human health from all those devices?
On what do you mean human health? Like the
Like you told me, it's infrared light.
yes. So all
In your eye and
it's safe. All biometric devices go through a series of certifications. And in fact, in order for us to test, we have to go through our institutional review boards. And typically for iris, when iris recognition was first done in, back in the late 90s, there was a lot of questions about eye safety, right, with near-infrared light. But it's been deemed safe. The Iris device, commercially available, all of these devices are commercially available. It's just like a just ambient light.
just statistic for last 10 years as science, people start use very close cell phones and all the data and computers. Rate of eye disease just jump from 60% up, especially kids.
I'm,
They hanging out a lot of time around all those kind of stuff.
that, yeah, it might be just general, just to do with eye strain or whatever, with lack of depth, but it's got hardly anything to do, nothing with biometrics at all. So the way that we illuminate the eye and the way that we illuminate the cornea is just as you would normally. So it's a good question. There are IEC standards, so eye safety standards. There's bodies that look at this, obviously. And with any new technology, you get to that. I mean, one of the things that we see typically in our testing, especially on first gen stuff, is the depth of field, so the amount of distance from the eye to the device. And what we ask the subjects to do, sometimes they might say, well, the light's a little bright. So, from that case, it's not in the app developer's best interest to keep that light that bright, otherwise they're not going to sell the app. So you do see a lot of research being done in increasing that depth of field, as well as trying to collect it with as less illumination as possible.
Medical training and
Yeah.
it was like 20 years in medical field, so I know this perfect distance between regular sunlight between eyes,
Mhm.
like real light. It's like European standard, it's 30 centimeters for kids and for
Mhm.
for humans. That can be safe. Here it's too close.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, but they've gone through the safety process. So those ophthalmologists and safety people have determined that it's okay. Yeah, we've got all the stuff back in the center too, so be happy to show it to you. But I mean, it is a valid question as we start looking at these things. But yeah, we go through all of that. Good question, though. Yes.
In your opinion, what is the greatest setback for biometrics becoming popular and used more often?
What is the greatest setback? It's when the greatest there's two, I think. One is when people set it to a higher level than what it's trying to protect. And so that context, in passwords, we're replacing typically lousy passwords. That's always better. So I think when people stop using the biometric because it might not be easy to use and they revert back to the PIN or the password, that's when it becomes a shame, because that technology is there, but the people that have developed the technology just haven't made it as easy to use as a PIN or password. So there's a lot of work being done, and as you saw in that video, a lot of work being done in the usability of these things to make it as easy, as natural as possible. I get up, they did a great job on this. You just throw your thumb on it and it's done, right? And they wouldn't have put a fingerprint on this if they hadn't have done their homework on that. So I think the greatest thing is for these guys to have done it. The challenge with this now is to keep it going. And then on the other side is some of the challenges about making sure that as a biometric community, we let consumers know exactly where the data is being stored, take into account some of your issues with health, making sure that we clearly identify the parameters in which it's going to work, all right? And to make customers understand and make people that are going to buy these things understand that it's not just going to work like that every time. Your password doesn't work every time. We sometimes don't type the right password in, even though we know what the word is, right? So just measuring expectations, I think. Yes, Molly?
Steve, what happens in situations where you have elderly people with cataracts or things that are changing?
Sure. It's a really good question. Let me think about two things about how to answer this. The first bit of research that we ever did back in 2001, 2002 was to look at elderly fingerprints. Because what we want to be able to do is make sure that system is equitable to everybody, right? And what we found was that elderly fingerprints had very poor image quality. So if you take a look at someone that's around 70 or 80 years old, you'll find that their skin starts to get a little frail. My grandmother is 100, will be 101 in a couple of months, and she's a great fingerprint donator. Because her skin get bruises very easily. It doesn't have a lot of grip, right? It almost kind of needs a warranty repair on the fingerprints. And so what we want to be able to do is to make sure that we capture that. Now, obviously, bad image quality is bad performance, all right? And so we want to make sure that that is done. So there's the first thing, is just that segment, just looking at that age group. What we can do is when you enroll onto this thing, you create a template. And so what we can do is we can update that template as you get older, right? So with the hand geometry device that we have in the lab, I come in every day. I use it pretty okay, I think. There's no videos of me not using it properly. The pin I forget sometimes because you just change the pin. All right, just before Kevin heckles that out. But I use that, right? I use the device, and it updates every day. So if my fingers change some way, then it will just take that into account. Now, if I lop a finger off, then it's going to have the same challenge as everyone else that I work with. What happened there? And so you'd have to re-enroll. One of the challenges we do get, and we've done some work with DHS on this, is looking at aging, because our passports are good for 10 years. And regardless of what we think about ourselves, we do tend to wander off over those 10 years. Something, you either get bigger or smaller, you lose hair or you gain it, you change, right? And that's kind of interesting, and there aren't really good answers to all of these conundrums, basically because we have to collect that data, and collecting data over a longitudinal period of time is very, very expensive. We collected data in our center for 5 years, people coming in over a period of 5 years, but that becomes very difficult if you've got depending on who you're collecting, because this is a fairly transient population as well, right, with students coming in and out. So we have, that is a very much an active area of research. Some biometrics, such as eyes, are argued to be more stable, although there is some debate between the stability of eyes. But normally you can try and build in some form of logic to see where you're at, and then again use that context. If I'm coming in and over the border every time, I fly a lot, so I cross the border 20 times a year, 10 times a year, I don't know what it is. They should update my template, because my passport doesn't look like me, all right? Even my ID doesn't look really like me, off by 20 pounds or something now. So that's a challenge if we're using those soft biometrics in the card, right? Because I'm not really who I say I am on that thing, because I've grown. The other challenge is that for people that just travel once a year, or once every 2 years, or once every 3 years, then that separation of time becomes harder. So the immigration officer will go ahead and do some thought process on that and say the second logic. So again, it depends on context. If you're doing access control, you use it every day, multiple times a day, it gets used to you. It watches you age, and it takes that into account. If you're separated by a period of 3, 4, 5 years, then the biometric will do exactly like your friends do that haven't seen you for 5 years. Probably not friends, but you know what I'm saying. So, good question. Cataracts and all of that stuff, that's okay, we can handle that. Yes, sir.
There's a German firm called Security Research Labs that spoofed the iPhone and a Samsung fingerprint readers within days after it came out.
Yep.
And I think they've even taken to another step where they've actually photographed a German politician's hand, and based on that, they spoofed again.
Yep.
Now there's a new technology coming out that basically just doesn't only read the latent fingerprint, if you will, but also ultrasonically looks at the finger and uses that as a verification mode. Do you have any insights on that new technology?
Yeah, it's funny actually. It's we tested that in 2000. Ultrasonic. There was a company. I'm trying to think what the company's name was now. I can't recall. But it was about this big. It was a fingerprint sensor. You put your fingerprint down, and it went underneath. Their logic was that it went underneath a couple of layers of skin to make sure that it was live. Yeah, I think so spoofing aside, I think all of these manufacturers and everything vendors and whatnot of biometrics, will take into account lots and lots of other variables in order to make sure A, you're live, and B, you're in the context in which you're trying to make the transaction, right? So I think there's going to be biometrics plus all of that other information that you leak about yourself. From the spoofing aspect of it, yeah, you can spoof pretty much anything, right? So in the context of the Germans getting the fingerprint of the finance minister because the TV was in 4K, and they could pull it out and they could crop it and they could throw it in a matcher and say, voila, we've matched. The context of that is, yeah, they just cut an image, threw it in an extraction algorithm, got the minutia, got another image, throw it in an extraction algorithm, and they said, voila, we've matched. What they didn't do was make a transaction. So you can spoof a lot of things. We leave a lot of things about us around. How many of us post our faces somewhere? How many of us take selfies? So what the context for the app people now and for developers are, okay, let's try and figure out a way also to stop that from happening, but at the same time also wrap in and make it a lot harder. Then on the flip side, also look back at those passwords. What am I trying to stop you getting access to? And if it is a magstripe card, then it's still better because that took a lot of effort and time to hack into that thing and take the photograph. I sometimes joke, you put all this security on the wall and then you're going to lob a brick through the window. So how much time do you want to spend spoofing the hand geometry machine when we use low-spit glass or whatever, right? So, but yeah, it's fascinating. Stephanie Shuckers from Clarkson University does a lot of work in that area in iris recognition. It's fascinating with spoofing. Yeah.
So in your work, I'm guessing that you use pretty strong encryption to store these images of various types, etc. The bigger question, as you're gathering contextual information to make it easier but yet more secure, in your experience, is all that data being properly encrypted by these companies? So that the trail that you're leaving, how easy it is for application developers to get to, by selling you a game that's actually trying to look in your phone and get all this other information. And likewise, what kind of controls are you seeing regarding, I scan my thumbprint and somebody decides to take it and store it online in the cloud somewhere to use it for who knows what?
Good questions. Let me think. So the first part of the question is contextual. It's amazing how much we just don't read the T's and C's. So when I download an app or I do something and I just go accept. I did it this morning when Apple pushed out a new update. I didn't sit down and read it. I would have missed my 9 o'clock. And then you would have had someone else. Or no one. We just blast through that. We don't care. Now, yeah, I guess naively, when we looked at some vendors and we looked at what that phone was pulling, that was kind of interesting. We were like, oh, really? Because I guess you know that it's pulling all kinds of stuff. But when you see it pull all kinds of stuff, that's a different thing, right? So I think there's some level of naivety with us, right? That we sit there and go, well, I got all these phones and it's just doing this. Well, no, it does collect all of that information. That's how they can serve some of this stuff to you for free, right? They've got all of that information. So in some cases, I think we are our own worst enemy because we just don't read the T's and C's. We just plow through it. With respect to securing fingerprint data and all of the biometric data, you will always have cases where people will break into things. And you will always have people that try and stop them to break into things. And that is just a continuation, whether it's social security numbers, whether it's data, or whether it's fingerprint data or iris data. It behooves the companies to try and secure that as best as possible. And I would assume that the majority of app developers and companies that do identity management, the big companies that do identity management, look at that. There are cases, right? We just seen OPM, right, where they've just done a whole bunch of fingerprints have just gone. But that would be no different to any other data. There's plenty of ways to not store a raw image, all right? And if you don't store what I'm talking about with a raw image is a fingerprint, all right? So you saw the picture of Zach. Let me see whether it's up on the screen. Might have killed it. Yep, he killed it. The eye on his screen. Now, you wouldn't want to store that eye. You shouldn't. You should store a template, and you should encrypt that template. And so if that template gets stolen, you delete the template, you re-enroll, and you shift it a little bit, all right? So just because you have two eyes doesn't mean that you only have two goes at this. If you're a good biometric vendor, you will take that into account. That's been a long criticism. I have 10 fingers, I have two eyes, I have one face. What if I lose it? That's been around since this stuff started. So hopefully by now they've figured that out. And so, but you will get people that just don't respect data, and they will just not encrypt it, and they won't do anything. But I think that's just part of life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But in your field particularly, we're approaching HIPAA data, right? I mean, because this is physical kinds of attributes and health information, et cetera. Do you see that the protection of that data is ahead of the curve, or is it like most everything else, it's behind the curve? So by nature of your business, are we more concerned about that as an industry or discipline?
Kevin's going to make me run out of the clock, but you got two sides of that. One is that from a customer's perspective, if I have my medical records and I lock it down with a biometric, I think that's more secure, all right? I would love to have my medical records locked down by my biometric when I log on to an EHR, because the one that I use just is a username and password, and it's really pretty simple to figure out stuff. I mean, it's not, well, in my opinion, it's not the best. I would love to have a biometric logged on that. So from a customer's perspective, I think that would be a lot better. It's a lot better than what I have today. With respect to locking down biometrics with all the other data, I just think that they shouldn't store raw images. And therefore, if they're storing templates that they protected properly, or even if they get hacked, it's not the end of the world from a biometric perspective. If you're storing raw images, you need to do just as much securing as you would my vaccination records or anything else. I think, obviously, OPM has definitely put a light on that today, or yesterday.
Did they store images?
I don't know. I didn't look too deeply.
And how much time was spent on the communication path on stuff like the
Well, that's a great question, right? That's something that typically you'd want to take a look at as part of securing, right? You don't want to add a biometric and not make it any more secure, right? So I think that's part of say ITAP's due diligence, if they were looking at this, would be to look at the entire sensor, what it outputs. Is it doing the feature extraction on here and sending the template down the pike, or is it sending a raw image down the pike? That's something that people in information security need to know as part of the due diligence of deployment. Yes.
It's time. But I want to thank you guys all for coming out here today. Steve will stick around here if you have questions. All of these videos are being recorded, and we will post them online here in the future. So thank you guys very much. Thank you, Dr. Elliot.
Thanks.